Comedian Gary Little has died aged 61 following what has been described as a tragic climbing accident in Scotland, leaving behind a shocked and heartbroken comedy community. The devastating news was confirmed on Friday, sending ripples through the entertainment world and beyond. Reports indicate that the award-winning Scottish icon died while on a hill climb, although the precise details remain scarce. At this stage, no official cause of death has been released, and those closest to him are still grappling with the suddenness of it all. For many, the shock is compounded by the fact that Gary was still actively performing and had a calendar filled with upcoming shows. In fact, he had been scheduled to perform in Aberdeen next month, a gig that fans had been eagerly anticipating. That performance will now never happen, and instead, the stage lights will dim in his honor. Gary was known as one of Scotland's finest comedians, a man whose storytelling prowess, quick wit, and relatable humor made him a household name across the country. His ability to turn the mundane into the hysterical was unmatched, and he had a way of making audiences feel as if they were sharing an intimate chat with a friend rather than watching a performance. The news of his passing prompted a wave of tributes from fellow comedians and fans alike. Among the first to react was fellow comic Kevin Bridges, who took to Instagram to share his heartbreak. Posting a candid photo of Gary, Kevin wrote simply but poignantly, "R.I.P. Big Gary, very sad news." Those few words, short as they were, carried the weight of decades of respect, camaraderie, and shared experiences in the often challenging world of stand-up comedy. The Stand, the iconic Glasgow comedy club where Gary had performed countless times over the years, also released a statement, one that reflected the deep sense of loss felt by those who had worked closely with him. "We here at The Stand are utterly devastated to hear the news of the passing of Big Gary Little. An incredible comic, huge personality, and friend to many. We are lost for words, and he will be profoundly and sorely missed. Our thoughts go out to all his family and friends right now. There will be many a comic thinking about him tonight, telling stories and raising a glass. He would have liked that." That final sentiment, "he would have liked that," resonated deeply with those who knew Gary well. He was, after all, a man who valued camaraderie and connection above all else. His sense of humor was not limited to the stage, it was part of his DNA. Whether in the green room before a gig, on a long car ride to a festival, or at the bar after a show, Gary was the guy with a story, a joke, and an infectious laugh that could light up even the weariest of faces. The Some Laugh podcast team, who had the privilege of featuring Gary both in conversation and in live performances, expressed their grief in a heartfelt post. "We're absolutely gutted to learn of the passing of the legend Gary Little. Gary was one of the best stand-up Scotland has ever produced, an absolute powerhouse of a comedian as well as a genuinely lovely guy with a heart of gold. It was a pleasure to learn from someone like Gary as we were all coming up on the comedy scene, and his episode and appearance on our live show are up there with the all-time moments of the pod." For younger comedians, Gary was more than just a veteran performer. He was a mentor, a guide, and in many cases, a source of inspiration. His advice often came in the form of stories, funny, brutally honest, and laced with lessons learned the hard way. He wasn't the type to lecture. Instead, he would share his own missteps and triumphs in a way that encouraged others to keep going, even when the road seemed impossible. Gary's journey to becoming one of Scotland's comedic treasures was far from conventional. He first rose to prominence in the early 2000s after gaining recognition as a finalist in a stand-up competition hosted by the Stand Comedy Club. But his life before comedy was turbulent, shaped by mistakes, challenges, and moments of redemption that would later become part of his onstage narrative. In the early 90s, Gary served time in prison in Scotland, a period that would test his resilience and later influence his comedic voice. He would return to jail again in 2007, this time after a high-profile case involving the theft of £50,000 worth of books from publisher HarperCollins. In a bizarre twist that seemed almost out of a crime novel, Gary, who was working at HarperCollins' warehouse in Bishopbriggs as a forklift truck driver, began taking the books and selling them on eBay. The theft occurred just 47 days before the end of his 4-year license period, a near miss that prompted the presiding judge, Lord McEwen, to comment on the tragedy of almost making it before stumbling. At Glasgow High Court, Lord McEwen said, "He almost got through to the last fence and stumbled. He's got enough trouble, and I think it would be unmerciful if I was to add to it. My view of this is that the right thing to do would be to make no order, and hopefully he will be able to appear at the festival in Edinburgh. I might even go and see him. That unusual moment in court reflected something many people came to understand about Gary. His life was not defined by mistakes alone, but by the way he picked himself back up afterward. Rather than hide from his past, he often wove those experiences into his routines, turning what could have been sources of shame into moments of shared laughter and reflection. Through serving 4 years of an 8-year sentence for drug-related charges, Gary was released in 1999 and set out on a path that would ultimately change his life. Stand-up comedy became not just a profession, but a lifeline. His performances were raw, authentic, and grounded in lived experience, which made them resonate with audiences far and wide. Away from the stage, Gary had a quieter side. He often spoke of his love for the Scottish outdoors, particularly walking and hiking. His social media was peppered with photos from his adventures in the Highlands, often accompanied by his beloved dog. These moments captured another dimension of Gary, a man who appreciated solitude and nature, even as he thrived in the spotlight of a packed comedy club. Comedian Gary Little's story is one of contrasts, a life that blended light and shadow, triumph and struggle, missteps and redemptions. His sudden death at the age of 61 has left many people stunned, partly because Gary seemed like the sort of person who could survive anything. To those who knew him, he had a resilience that almost felt indestructible. It wasn't just his sharp wit or his commanding stage presence that defined him, it was his ability to endure, to keep going no matter how messy or complicated life became. That's part of why his loss feels so unreal, as if one of the constants of the Scottish comedy scene has been suddenly ripped away. In the days following his passing, the tributes have been overwhelming. From comedy clubs to pubs, from podcasts to social media feeds, stories about Gary have been shared endlessly. Some are funny, some are deeply moving, and some are both at once, which in a way feels entirely fitting. People telling these stories keep circling back to the same points: his generosity, his honesty, his charisma, and the way he made you feel like you were the only person in the room when he was speaking to you. Gary didn't fake warmth for the sake of appearances. If he liked you, you knew it, and if he didn't, you probably knew that too. Those who shared the stage with him often speak about his uncanny ability to read a room, to gauge exactly how far he could push a joke and when it was time to pull back. He was bold, but not reckless. He could be edgy without being cruel, and if he ever went too far, he had the skill to bring the audience right back with a single line. That sort of mastery doesn't happen overnight. It comes from years of working rooms of every size, from tiny back rooms with 10 people to packed theaters with hundreds. Gary had done them all, and each one seemed to sharpen his craft.